Hey folks, so I'm actually going to, since we're all into raising hands, I'm going to start with a show of hands. How many of you have ever felt too hot or too cold in your homes or offices? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so my journey really starts with your raised hands. I'm a tech geek. I'm a networking dude. So my daughter was one. We moved her into her own bedroom, and she would wake up in the middle of the night. And I found out that the temperature in her room was dropping about 10 degrees at night. So as a self-respecting engineer, I quit my job to fix the damn problem, which is why we are here. But originally, my background, as I said, I was doing backhaul wireless networks and voice networks. So if you use Verizon, there's a 95% chance it goes over a backhaul network that I did. At one point, I had one of the world's first terabit routers sitting in my garage. And at that point, I had the undisputed record of being the most expensive garage heater in the entire world. But as I embarked on this journey, I came across some pretty interesting facts. So today's Earth Day, we're going to talk about this. The buildings are literally killing our planet. So commercial buildings specifically, like the one that we are in, are the fourth largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So in New York, they did a study, and what they found out is that basically about 67% of the energy, the greenhouse gases in that entire city were coming from the commercial buildings. And roughly about 60% of that is from what's called HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, right? So just to get a sense of like what is the scale of the problem that we're talking about, we're going to go through a few words and bring this into context, right? So the context means like the human mind is not really well adapted to understanding things like numbers, right? Million, billion, trillion. In fact, one of my favorite, you guys probably know Richard Feynman, right? Lots of geeks over here. So Richard Feynman, physicist, one of my favorite heroes, and he used to say that when he was growing up, like million, billion, trillion, these were astronomical numbers, right? Because that's what they used in astronomy. But by the time he was older, these are economical numbers because these are what the economists use, right? So now if you see the debt ceiling in the US is $13 trillion, $1.3 trillion is what they're going to add to the debt ceiling. So just as an example of this carbon scale, let's just figure out how much carbon is embodied in the things that we use every day. Like a plastic straw. That uses about 1.4 grams of CO2 inside that plastic straw. If you look at a paper straw, it actually does worse than the plastic straw in terms of just the CO2 aspect. Right? It's got about 1.5 grams of CO2 in just that paper straw. So any people over here use a metal straw? Excellent. So a metal straw, this is going to be interesting, actually is about 217 grams of CO2. So if you want to break even on that metal straw, you actually have to use it at least 150 times before it's going to reduce the carbon impact of just using a plastic straw. Similarly, one of the interesting things is that we tend to make what are called short-sighted decisions, myopic decisions, right? So specifically, when we are faced with a huge amount of decision points, we try to focus on the things that we can do on a day-to-day basis, which are narrow, which are in sight within our grasp. So continuing on the carbon scale, let's just continue this, right? So the plastic bags that we use, typically you're going to be using about 20 grams of CO2 in a plastic bag. Now, if you use a paper bag, that's about 4 times more. It's about 80 grams of CO2, which is embodied in that paper bag. If you use one of those recyclable plastic bags, right, the reusable ones, they use about 300 grams of CO2 in that plastic bag. But if you have the really fancy cotton reusable bag that you go do your groceries, that bag is 3.5 kilograms of CO2. So you better be using that one cloth bag 175 times before you're going to break even with a plastic bag, right? Or it's 44 times more than if you're going to be using a paper bag. The other word that I want to introduce is a concept of inconvenient, right? Like something that is going to cause comfort or discomfort, more importantly. Sacrifice. So one of the key things we do is we keep asking people to make sacrifices in terms of like, hey, don't do this. So what I want to do is like just bring in, like when we say don't do this, what does it really impact? What is the real impact of the choices we make? One of the preeminent people to actually talk about inconvenience is Al Gore, The Inconvenient Truth. Many people have probably seen that, right? So continuing on that carbon scale, if you were to turn on LED bulb, which is the equivalent of a 100-watt incandescent, that an LED bulb is going to be using about 125 grams of CO2 over 12 hours. Right? A work laptop in one day is going to be using 360 grams of CO2. If you were to use a smartphone, that uses about 3.5 kilograms of CO2 across an entire year though, so far more efficient. Right? Which is the same as pretty much if you idled a car for 12 minutes. So using your cell phone for 1 year is the same as using your car for 12 minutes. Now here's the thing, that one car is the equivalent of using the LED bulb for 360 hours, 186 plastic straws, or plastic bags, or 2,500 straws. So that's single car. If you use the same car for 1 hour, you would be burning about 18.5 kilograms of CO2. If you use an airline and you took a commercial airline flight, for every hour of travel, you end up using 100 kilograms of CO2. If you took a private jet, it would be 500 kilograms of CO2 for every seat, for every hour that you're using. But if you use that car for 1 year, it would be 5,000 kilograms of CO2. So what does that really equate to? So one car for 1 year is the equivalent of 50.9 hours of airline travel, or 3.43 million of those plastic straws. So the last point is that I want to introduce that is hopelessness. Like when you're faced with such a wide variety of dizzying numbers, what should you be doing? What is hopelessness? Is like a feeling that nothing you do is going to matter. Right, so continuing on this, let's put all of these things that we've talked about so far. We've got a plastic straw, we've got a paper straw, we've got a metal straw, we've got the plastic bag, we've got the paper bag, and we've got the plastic reusable bag, and we've got the cotton bag. Right, so the cotton bags is about 3.5 kilograms of CO2, embodied CO2. We've got the LED bulb, we've got a laptop, we've got a smartphone, you've got a car which is idling, or you've got a car which is running for 1 hour. The next is you can take an airplane, you can take a private jet, or you can have a car which is running for 1 year. So all of these are put in a carbon scale. So the question really becomes, which of these choices are you supposed to make? What's going to be most effective? Right? So what can an average person really do? Which one of these choices should you be making? So I'm going to come to, this is why I want to talk about tech. This is about tech. Right? So I want to be hopeful about this. So one of the key interesting things I want to ask, like, has anyone ever seen these bars? Yes. So some people actually talk about this and say this is the Netflix bars. Here's the interesting thing. This is the global warming which is occurring over the last 150 years. All right. So you can see that global warming is a thing. What we did do is we correlated this with the amount of CO2 that we are pumping up into the atmosphere. So you can see there's a very, very direct correlation between the amount of CO2 that we're pumping into the atmosphere and the global warming which is going on. Right? This is not a hoax. This is not false media. This is a reality. This is truly correlation. In the last 20 years, the price of renewables has dropped down quite dramatically. We keep talking about wind. We keep talking about solar. They're very, very affordable. But one of the interesting things you'll see is that even though the prices have dropped down, we have yet not reduced the amount of CO2 which we are pumping up into the atmosphere. That kind of continues up on an upward trajectory. So the question really becomes, what's going to save the world, really? I'm a tech geek, like most of you guys here. Right? So I take heart in this very interesting graph over here. What this is showing is the number of calculations that you can do for a single dollar in a single second. If you go back over here in the 1900s, you could do 1/1000th of a calculation for every dollar that you spent in a single second. To put in another word, you had to spend $1 billion if you wanted to do one calculation every second. If you fast forward to where we are now, we can do over 1 billion calculations for every single second, for every single dollar that we spend every single second. And this looks like it's a pretty linear graph, right? That technology is progressing pretty linearly, except we cheated. If you look at the y-axis, that is actually logarithmic, that is not linear. If you were to put it on a linear graph, this is what it would look like, right? This is Moore's law in action. So truly speaking, this is the only curve I know that exceeds the slope of the CO2 emissions that I showed. So our take is that you somehow have to apply technology to the problem that we have at hand. You cannot have a linear problem, linear solution be applied to a problem that is actually logarithmic, which is the carbon CO2 emissions that we are doing in the atmosphere, right? So at 75F, the company that I founded, we basically use smart sensors and controls to make commercial buildings more efficient and comfortable than ever before, right? And as we started on this journey, we came across some pretty interesting facts, and I'm going to talk about this, right? The first thing that I did is when I started, we basically came across this building called the Edge. At that point, was the most advanced building in the world. Had about 40,000 sensors that catered to the indoor air quality, to the lighting, to the comfort of the people inside. But there was a dirty, dark secret. This building, just the building controls, the automation to drive this building were over $50 million, right? It's the kind of loose change that most people really don't have lying around. And the primary reason for that was that building controls, the things that come together to make them work, are kind of like Lego blocks. They're very flexible, they can do a lot of things, but ultimately you need a Lego master, like my friend Eric Ries here, who come in and make a bespoke solution for each and every building. Right? I'm a tech geek, I said, right? So to me, this is kind of like back in the day, you bought an Apple I, you brought it home, you soldered it together, and then you learned programming in BASIC to kind of solve your own problems, kind of like the Flintstones, right? But today, you want to go into the mall, you want to buy an iPhone, and you want to be productive in 3 minutes. If it ever takes you 5, you're probably screaming bloody murder. But in the controls industry, it's still very common to people to take in these products from different companies and put them together in a bespoke solution for each and every building. And you may think this is a pretty old picture, this is back in the 70s, except it was taken last year. Right? So we're still reliving this today. And to me, that is an opportunity where you can disrupt. So one of the things that we did is we ended up creating a complete, what we call building intelligence solution that actually goes and transforms how these buildings work. So it's a solution that includes things like sensors, digital sensors, uses IoT a lot, uses a huge amount of machine learning to basically go and create a complete end-to-end solution that works in buildings from about 10,000 square feet to some of the larger buildings we are in are over 1 million square feet. So think of us, as I said, using machine learning and applied IoT, and primary thing that we're really trying to do is make sure that the people inside the building are comfortable, right? So what is called an occupant experience, that they have more productive, they have better indoor air quality, but also at the same time, they're using less energy, right? So the overall operational efficiency of the building is enhanced as well. So think of us as like the Edge, that building that I showed you, that very sophisticated building, $50 million, but Edge out of the box. So you don't really have to go and mix and match and do all of these pieces together. So we get in millions of data points each and every day, combined with the weather, figure out what's the optimal way of running a building, and that's how we actually end up running these buildings. So you end up having far more even temperatures, better indoor air quality, but also importantly, the idea was that we actually want to make these systems very easy to deploy and commission. So we made them wireless. We put in a huge amount of what we call software-defined hardware. So as opposed to using hardware which is dumb, it is defined by the software itself. Right? So we've done a fair amount of time motion studies, basically indicating that we're somewhere between 7 to 10x faster to put in than a traditional system. So, but most importantly, germane to the conversation that we're having today, what we found is the algorithms, if you use better technology, if you use more granular sensors, and you tie it with better algorithms, you can end up saving a huge amount of energy. Right? So what we found is that we save somewhere between 30 to 50% energy compared to a traditional systems. Right? Widely studied, we did a study with the National Renewable Energies Lab over 2.5 years of study over 850 climatic zones, 16 different building types, huge amount of data sets, and the results are pretty consistent. So somewhere in the region of about 30 to 50% in energy savings for the equipment we end up controlling. And then we basically package it up so that all the facility managers can have live insight into how the buildings are actually really performing. So on average, we saved about 41% in energy. What does that really mean? Right? What does 40%, 42% of energy saving really translate to in a building? So one of the key examples is we work with a company called Home Furniture. They have their flagship store across the street as well, which is also controlled by 75F, but this is one of the first stores that we did for them. Right, so when we started and we implemented this in their building, what we found is that a huge drop in the amount of energy they were using. Right? So over about 2.5 years, this is about 11 million kilo BTU. So these are very large numbers over a large period of time. Their Energy Star scores increased. But let's get this in context. And what do these numbers really imply? Right? So what we're saying is that we saved about 11,000 million BTUs. BTU is a type of energy. Right? So what does that really imply? It converts into about 3,000 megawatt hours of energy. What does that really translate into? That translates into about $257,000 of savings for those folks. It translates, more importantly, into 2.3 million kilograms of CO2 saved over those 42 months, just in this particular example. So if we were to put this back on the carbon scale, this is what it would look like. This is Home Furniture. This is on a yearly basis, right? So this is 654,000 kilograms of CO2 which have been saved. What would that be equal to? It would be the equivalent of 1,000 hours of airline travel and 10,000 hours of car travel and 100,000 cotton bags and 1 million plastic bags and 15 million plastic straws. These are all ands, these are not ors, right? So one single building ends up saving this much impact every year for as long as the system is installed. And why do I share this, right? So we've had a huge amount of accolades after this. And we've been backed by some of the biggest names in climate change. So we've been fortunate, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, all of those folks have invested in 75F. But the results speak for themselves. So this is deployed in some of the larger buildings. So Salvation Army uses 75F. We do SmartWorks, we do WeWorks buildings, they use 75F as well. We did one of the world's, actually this is the world's largest wireless control solution out in Flipkart, which is a competitor to Amazon in India. Right? It's got 14,000 sensors and control solution systems that actually work together every single minute and pump out about 200,000 data points every single minute. Right? And it's all wirelessly deployed. And then some of the biggest names in the HVAC space. So Daikin is the world's largest HVAC equipment manufacturer. They use 75F as well. So you'll actually see that it's Daikin, but it's powered by 75F. Why do I share this? I shared this because on Earth Day, I wanted to share the impact of what technology can do. Right? Dr. Gordon Moore, again, one of my heroes, he just passed about 3 weeks ago. But This is all possible because we can continue to make these small sacrifices, but none of them compare to if we can leverage technology. Right? You guys are all technologists over here, which is why we are here to learn. So that's one of the key things I want to share, is that we can make these huge impactful decisions by just leveraging the power of what's been available to us now with compute cycles. So I share on this last passing thought, which is like, 10 years from now, you're all going to be sitting in your driverless cars, right? We're all going to be zooming around in that. But can you imagine their buildings are going to be run the way they are? Of course not, right? Everything is going to change. It is all going to change for the better, and it's all because of technology and some of these compute cycles that we're talking about. So folks, thank you so much for coming, and really look forward to seeing all of you guys together. And we're also all the time looking for some really good geeks who are looking to join 75F. So any of you ever want to cross the road over and join us at 75F, would love to talk with you guys around. I'm going to be around, so thank you so much.